and welcome to my next Smite God Arena guide. You know the rules. I have a cold right now, so I apologize if I sound like a freaking moron and ramble a bit, and cough a bit. Apologies ahead of time, but I'm suffering through it for you guys. So we're doing Thanatos this week, so let's see the God builder I've got. Basically, for items, I should say Thanatos is an assassin. He is a lot more in depth. He is a lot harder to play than Loki. Um, let me show you what I've got item wise before we dive into the abilities, because we're going to be on that for a while. Item wise, we start with Warrior Tabi for the build. Name, physical power, movement speed, you know the drill. Next is Jotunn's Wrath, which is very useful for basically all assassins. It's also really nice for the cooldown reduction, since you get Thanatos' ult a bit more. Next you get Hastened Fatalis. This is very good for Thanatos. It gives a ton of attack speed, movement speed, and then the passive debuff removes that movement speed debuff. Next is DeathBringer. You get that early in this build, trust me, it's very useful. Physical power, crit chance, you know, the DeathBringer stuff. Next is Malice. This is very good for crit chance and physical power. And then, of course, you get the bleed or what have you for the damage over time. And then last is Titan's Bane. Basically, this is just for physical penetration. It is, unfortunately, very hard to get in this build, so if you were to reorder, maybe throw it ahead of Hastened Fatalis, or maybe right after Hastened Fatalis before DeathBringer. I think that would probably be a really good switch. I have it as last, but putting it after Hastened Fatalis I think would be pretty solid also. And then abilities, Thanatos is very ability heavy. If you don't know what you're doing with his abilities, you're going to get destroyed. It is big time because of the passive. You get to see basically his execution, which is hovering death. It's his ultimate. Basically, his passive shows them all to you. They all have a red skull. Killing enemies gives you HP. And then all of his abilities cost health and mana to use. That can be annoying, but it's only if you're missing a lot of your abilities, really. Next is one of his best abilities, I think, is his Death Scythe. He throws his scythe. It does pretty good damage, and then it does bonus damage to gods, and then you get healing for 75% of the damage dealt, with a good slow on him too for 20%. And then this is a very, very important ability. Scent of Death. This is how you go God mode with Thanatos. Basically, whenever an enemy has, whenever their health is in the execution threshold, you will run their asses down. And then you get physical penetration and a bonus movement speed. Oh, and yeah, if you're running someone down, you get even more bonus speed. So, basically, this is God mode for Thanatos. With his physical penetration ability up, it gets scary, trust me. And then his scythe swing is what I call it, but it's really called Soul Reap. Deals physical damage and silences enemies. He moves slower, and then obviously it costs some of his health. All of them do. It's very good for 1v1ing enemies, especially mages, since you silence, and the silence up at max rank is pretty scary. And then the execution for Thanatos. you see that threshold gets pretty high at 40% eventually. It costs 10% of max HP, but this is how you're going to probably get a lot of your kills, and before late game, that is, and when you can start absolutely destroying everyone. But let's go to the God Builder I've got set up. We've got Death Scythe, first, and then Soul Reap, Death Scythe, Execution, Hovering Death, Death Scythe. Basically, Death Scythe is what you want early. For main reason being that Thanatos is very easy to kill. He has jack for HP, and he has terrible defense. If you look up the definition of a glass cannon, you will see Thanatos on it. But for the most part, just get Death Scythe early. Hovering Death when you can get it. And then don't worry too much about Hand of Death till late, simply because it's already really good. So getting the other abilities earlier, I think, is a lot more useful. And let's get into some gameplay and more in-depth on his abilities. We're going to be here. We might be here a while. Okay, so Thanatos, with his abilities, like I said, he is very hard to execute if you don't know what you're doing. He is definitely one of the hardest gods to get really good at. Basically because he takes a ton of damage. He dies very easily. Even if you're having a good game with like 15 kills, you very well could end up with like 10 deaths. Thanatos, though, when you're on your game, is one of the most rewarding gods to play, though. I've faced people that just drop 25 kills with like 6 deaths with Thanatos. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Basically with Thanatos, early game, don't go for much. Throw Scythes every once in a while, just try and farm some minions, you know, with Soul Reap, his Scythe swing. That's a very good minion killing ability. Go for executions, though. Obviously, that's your best ability for getting kills, that is. If you see an execution, go for it. Just be careful not to miss. It is very easy to miss, since Thanatos has a bit of a delay between when you tell him to dive down and when he does. Enemy gods like Mercury and Xbalanque are very good at dodging Thanatos' execution. And just don't miss, you'll get made fun of for it, trust me, I do all the time. With Thanatos, though, late game, after you get like DeathBringer, this is when he can get really scary. Basically, once you start getting those crit chances up, you can go in and just about 1v1 about any god, assuming you're getting crits and whatnot. The only ones you might have trouble 1v1ing are like Xbalanque and other really fast-hitting hunters, simply because they're built to shut down most assassins and whatnot. So make sure you make use of Soul Reap, and if they start getting you down on health a bit, hit them with the Scythe. Make sure you don't miss. But also make sure you're using Sense Death. That is how you do insane damage. If you're Sense Deathing, hitting those crits and whatnot on your basic attacks, it's very hard to get killed. With that being said, obviously, even when you're on your game with Thanatos, it's very easy to die if they get a couple lucky big crits on you. It's just the nature of how he plays. You can drop 20 kills a game and still die about 15 times. It's just the nature of the beast. If you're up against some a lot of mages, like 2 or 3 mages, you're probably gonna, if you're on your game, that's when it can get scary. But that's Thanatos. He's one of Definitely one of the hardest gods in the game to get really good at, but when you're on your game with him, it can be one of the most fun gods to play. Thanks for watching.